it was great until Amazon sort of entered the scene at about 100,000 miles an hour. Literally, in the space of 8 months, the entire dynamics of the supplement business changed. It went from being a business where if customers liked your brand, they were loyal to you and they'd buy from you every month, to the race to the bottom for the cheapest products possible on Amazon. Margins went from 60% to 10%. People were bidding $10 a click for the word pre-workout or fat burner. And when you're not a large national brand, it's not sustainable. It was good for many years, but then it just became very stressful. And I decided that I had too much working capital tied up in a business to be working at very low margin.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Pivot to Profit. Today we're going to talk to an entrepreneur expert, James Klein. So excited to have you on the show today. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, thanks. Wonderful to be here.
Awesome. Let me officially introduce you. James Klein is a lifelong entrepreneur with more than 40 years of experience in building and leading businesses across a wide range of industries, from travel and restaurants to supplements and now the pet world. I am a dog mom. He's the CEO of Adonis Vitality, TrueCanine, and Harmonium Health, and also works as a consultant to fellow business owners, helping them scale and succeed. James even stepped into the direct response marketing space right after the COVID pandemic, adding another dimension to his entrepreneurial journey. He's passionate about business, loves the hustle, and brings decades of hard-earned wisdom to every venture he touches. Welcome, James, to the podcast. So pumped to have you here.
Thank you so much. And I guess when you say decades of experience, that's just another way of saying that I'm old.
We call it seasoned. Yes.
Yes, so I'm definitely well seasoned.
You're like a really good cast iron skillet. You know, the bacon tastes better coming out of that. All right, James. So before we dive into all the experience, let's start with, what did little James want to be when he grew up?
When I was very young, I wanted to be an accountant / CPA. I was always good with numbers, and the numbers part of thing came very easy to me. But I also realized quite early on that I would make a terrible employee. So that's sort of what pushed me into my entrepreneurial journey in my late teens and early 20s.
Got you. I got you. So you were raised by entrepreneurial parents, right? So what were you taught about money as a kid?
I was taught to respect money and that you had to work for it, no matter how successful you are, that it didn't come easily. And a good month could just as easily be followed by a bad month. So definitely don't spend it all when things are good, and try to balance the emotions. Don't get too up when you make a big sale or something, and don't be too crushed if a project you're working on doesn't move forward, because it takes a very big emotional toll.
Agreed. The ups and downs of the entrepreneur journey. So let's talk about yours. What was your first business? Because you've done a lot of things in 40 plus years. So what was your first open sign and say, James owns a business?
Way back in the mid 1980s, which again, very long time ago, I was working in the family travel business, and my mom has been a travel agent for 55 plus years, very successful. And I realized that doing all the accounting on a manual basis just made no sense. One right systems and everything else, it was very hard to manage properly at scale. And I had taken some computer programming courses in university and decided that I was going to build an accounting system for the family travel business. Just for context, my first computer was an original IBM PC with two 5.25-inch floppy drives, no hard disk. Everything was very, very basic in those days. But over the period of about 6 months, I was able to build quite a good accounting system that I ultimately ended up licensing to some of Canada's biggest travel conglomerates, and sort of launched me into the IT business before anybody knew what the IT business really was.
Along the way, you've had multiple businesses. Tell us about some of the ones that you really enjoyed, that were really fun to do.
I enjoyed the IT business for a long time, until it got to a certain size where I was spending more time managing people than I was actually spending developing software or serving clients. And while managing people is important, that was not the best use of my energy, certainly.
So you're definitely the visionary, the starter, the idea guy, the build it and they will come guy, and then operations is not as much fun.
Well, I wouldn't go there totally in that I love execution and implementation. It's just the admin stuff, hiring and firing and all the drudgery. And what I figured out early on, and this is something I tell all my consulting clients, is figure out the stuff that you either hate doing or you're not good at and hire somebody for those roles. Because if you're not good at it or you really just don't enjoy it, it sucks the life out of you every time you have to bear down and do it.
Absolutely. I tell our clients, do what you do well and delegate the rest. Because to your point, if it sucks your energy and it's stuff that you're not good at and you don't enjoy, it just slows you down.
Exactly.
So how did you get into the supplement space?
In right 2000, which again is mind-boggling to me how long ago it was. I had a full head of hair at that point, but then no gray, so judge accordingly. I had a friend who was a world champion athlete who decided to get into the supplement business, and he needed me, number one, to guide him on running the business, and also needed some money. So big mistake, never invest with friends because it generally doesn't end up well. But I threw a little bit of money into the business. We put a good group together, and within about a year and a half, we had done a reverse takeover of an OTC shell. We had raised $7 or $8 million, got distribution for our product throughout the United States. And I ultimately became the CFO of the public company. It was fun, but also terrifying at the same time. Sarbanes-Oxley had just come in, so I was the one signing all the disclosures, and my name was on everything. And I'll never do a public venture again. I've done 2 of them. And what happens is the people who put money into private placements want information over and above what you're making available to the public. It became just a massive weight on my shoulders. We'd put out a press release, and then for 3 days, my phone would ring. Well, I put $100,000 in. I should know more than what you disclosed. And that was absolutely not the case. After about a year and a half, I went to the board and said, I love being an entrepreneur. I hate being in the C-suite of a public company. Let's negotiate an exit, which we did. And then I immediately started a new supplement company with a friend without all the headaches of being public.
So much easier. And it's crazy how much control you lose when you go public. And people don't understand that. I've had clients that have gone public, and the control is the biggest thing. So many opinions, and the Sarbanes-Oxley and the watchdogs, and you can't just run your business anymore. You're just handling everyone else's expectations.
Exactly. I was probably spending 75% of my time talking to the lawyers and the accountants, and I hated every minute of it. I wanted to help grow the business, and I just really got bogged down in the back end. Nothing was exciting. Nothing was enjoyable. I was in Canada. We had an office in Florida. So I was in Florida every second week while my daughter was 2 years old at the time. So rough on the family life. When I had enough, I just had enough. And luckily, the board totally understood. We negotiated an exit that made sense for everybody involved.
I love it. So today you still are in the supplement business. So is it that business that you started back then, or is it a new version?
It's a couple of new versions. The industry that I entered in the early 2000s has evolved a lot. So for the longest time, I sold products to weightlifters and bodybuilders, which was a phenomenal market. We sold in retail stores like GNC and Vitamin Shop. We sold to the independent supplement stores through national distributors. And then we went online at the time, primarily with bodybuilding.com, which at the time was the world's largest seller online of nutritional supplements. They grew to over $500 million a year. And it was great until Amazon sort of entered the scene at about 100,000 miles an hour. Literally in the space of 8 months, the entire dynamics of the supplement business changed. It went from being a business where if customers liked your brand, they were loyal to you and they'd buy from you every month, to the race to the bottom for the cheapest products possible on Amazon. Margins went from 60% to 10%. people were bidding $10 a click for the word pre-workout or fat burner. And when you're not a large national brand, it's not sustainable. It was good for many years, but then it just became very stressful. And I decided that I had too much working capital tied up in a business to be working at very low margin. So I exited that space and entered the direct response world just before COVID hit, which was a very interesting experience.
That was a weird time to get into that. So how did you succeed and survive and thrive during COVID with direct response?
I'm a fast learner, and I had lots to learn. I had never seen a 45-minute video to sell a product. I had never seen a 10,000-word sales letter that people in the industry created to sell their products. So the first 6 months were definitely a struggle, but I quickly learned that it was all about forming partnerships. So affiliate marketing, direct response, partnership marketing, there are many ways to do it. And I was able to set up some very important partnerships that helped for the longest time. But that said, I'm primarily an e-com and a brand person. That's where my belief is. And in the direct response world, you create an offer and it could run for 6 months or a year. And when the offer gets tired, you create a new offer. So your business has no value if you ever want to sell because there's a very short lifespan. And retaining customers is hard because you're not building a brand. So the analogy I always use is Air Jordans. People who like Air Jordans will always buy more Air Jordan. But if you're just buying generic shoes at the dollar store, you have nothing to tie you to one company or another. And brand equity is exceptionally important.
So you've talked about how building a brand is better than creating an offer. Walk us through that logic and how you implement that.
When you're running an offer, your ideal goal is to sell the customer as much product as you can on day one. So in the supplement world, that quite often involves selling somebody 6 bottles of something they've never tried. And then as soon as they've completed that first purchase, trying to upsell them into another 6 or 12 bottles. So the whole focus is maximizing day one revenue. And what that's done, it's driven the cost of acquisition through affiliates higher and higher, in that there's always one vendor who's willing to pay more than the others. So when I entered the space, it would cost probably $80 to acquire a customer. Right now, there are companies paying $220, $240 per customer acquisition. So for the math to work, you have to sell the customer $350 worth of product, because when you factor in cost of goods, shipping, refunds, chargebacks, at $200 plus, you're maybe break even on day one at best. And then you've loaded the customer up with so much product that they might not come back to you for a year, even if they like your product. So I hate everything about that model. I would much rather sell somebody 1 bottle of product today, have them like it, come back, go on monthly recurring, and stay for a long time. So, the dilemma is, do you fight for new customers or do you fight really hard to keep your existing customers? And it's way less expensive to sell more to an existing customer than to acquire a new one, whether it's via an affiliate, buying traffic on Meta or Google or any of the platforms. Retention is key. And as you know, when you go to sell a business, the first thing any buyer is going to look at is what's your monthly recurring revenue, because that's stable and they can forecast revenue 12 months out, 24 months out, and then come up with a proper valuation for your business.
Exactly. So how you're defining brand is the brand loyalty, because using the shoe example, I have quite a few pair of Jordans actually, because I like them and I need them in multiple colors because I'm a bright colored person. But you're right, within the supplement space or the product space, if there's a brand that you like, you're loyal to it. And it is so much cheaper to sell another product to an existing client than to go get another one. And so often entrepreneurs are always trying to get the next client, instead of just nurturing the list that they have, because you're sitting on a gold mine. I talk to entrepreneurs all the time and I'm like, well, how many people did you sell to in the last 6 months? Oh, 100. Okay, well, have you talked to them at all? Have you sent them a newsletter? Have you called them? Have you sent them an SMS with a discount? Like, how are you reaching out to the people who already know, like, and trust you to buy something else because you're spending so much energy, effort, and resources to go get a new one when you already have 100 people that most likely half of them will buy from you again.
Exactly. So customer retention is key in my mind. Build an exceptional customer experience. Don't abuse them by emailing them too often. And the example I'll always use is if you ever sign up for a discount at Old Navy, all of a sudden you're getting 3-4 emails a day because they're promoting flip-flops or shorts or t-shirts or whatever it is. That to me is not a good customer experience because you're abusing your customer's email inbox, and eventually they're going to unsubscribe until they want a discount on the next purchase, and then they subscribe and play the game. So I would much rather email my customers twice a week, offer value, build the relationship, and show them the respect that they deserve.
I love the care that you take for the clients and the recognition of the value that they bring. Because far too often I see people missing that and not valuing that biggest asset of their clients and really valuing that. So I love that. Tell me about the pet industry that you're now got your toes in.
Yeah, so for the pet industry, I sell a probiotic for dogs. Got into the space about 3 years ago, in that I just saw an opportunity. I'm always looking for new opportunities, and I started doing some research on Amazon and looking at how congested the category was and did I think I could build something good. Sure enough, we spent 5 or 6 months developing the probiotic, did tons of testing on my dog, friends' dogs. We were sending samples all over the place to have people try it and see how their dogs liked it. Spent way more time talking about dog poop and consistency of dog poop than I ever thought I would. But it's a very loyal business. And one thing that we found is that there are many consumers who have multiple dogs. So now you're not selling 1 jar a month, but you're selling 5 or 6 or 8. So again, the customer lifetime value can be very high as long as you treat the consumer with respect.
And once you're a dog person, you typically stay a dog person. And so once you get one dog, you get another one. And then unfortunately, their lifespan is not as long as ours. So then once one passes, then you get another one. And so it's the brand loyalty comes back around to what you were talking about. So regardless of what dog is in the household, they're going to continue to want your product.
Yes. And what's interesting is that over 40% of US households own a dog. What we found, especially with older buyers, and slightly facetiously, many of the dog owners like their dogs more than they like their children, or they treat their dogs better than they treat their children and will spare no expense to keep their dogs happy, extend their lifespan, etc.
3 kids and I have a dog. I wouldn't say I like my dog more than my kids, but there are days.
Especially during the teenage years.
And they're all teenagers. So there are definitely days where Josie is at the top of the list. Okay. So James, as someone who is running multiple businesses, how do you manage your time and your energy while you're juggling all of that?
Interestingly, last year at the age of 62, I was put on medication for ADD. And what I realized in the couple of years preceding that is between running my own businesses as well as doing consulting, I was most productive on days where I was doing multiple things. As opposed to focusing on one thing for an entire day, my mind is all over the place and I'm not productive. And now that I look at it, when I was in school, there was no ADD. It was just, oh, James doesn't pay attention in class, or he's bored, or whatever the terminology was in those days. And that totally explains my educational path. I was smart enough that I could do homework 5 minutes before it was due, get good marks without studying or anything else. But I was always distracted and there was always something else going on. So I find that working on multiple projects keeps me way more productive than if I'm doing just one thing. It keeps my brain much more organized and allows me to accomplish much more.
I love it. And you know yourself well enough to know that if I just had one thing to do all day long, that would be boring and I would suck at it. So let's have 3 businesses and then juggle that plus consulting and we'll be great.
Exactly. And, people ask me when I'm going to retire. And my response is always, if I'm healthy, the day before I die. I need something to do. I have friends who retired in their 50s And within a year, they sort of got old and were bored and boring to be around. And most of them ended up going back into business just because they needed the stimulation. I definitely need stimulation.
Gonna ride it out until you hit the ground.
Yes, my mom is almost 91 and still actively works in the travel business, not because she needs the money, but she needs the stimulation.
So tell us about the consulting that you do. Who do you work with? What value do you bring? How do you support them? What does that look like?
Sure. I was pushed into the consulting business by a mutual friend of ours during COVID. We were in a Facebook group together that had about 650 marketers. And I was sharing lots of information in terms of warning letters and different things coming out of the FDA and the FTC as COVID first started, because people were saying, take vitamin C, it'll stop you from getting COVID. Not to get into the COVID discussion, but literally one day this friend called me and said, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? She says, you're giving away all this information that you've spent 20 years acquiring. You should start a consulting business. Okay. The next day I went into that Facebook group and created a post that said, if anybody needs help creating a supplement, branding, whatever it happens to be, I'm available. And within 36 hours, I had money in the bank from my first client. 5 years later, the consulting business probably represents about half my time. So I help people in the supplement business, but also have several people in the coaching space, primarily health coaches. And for the supplement people, it's everything from creating a supplement, creating a brand, telling the story, building out their e-commerce presence on Shopify and Amazon and TikTok, and viewing all the opportunities. For the coaching people, where I primarily help them is finding additional channels for them to sell in. Like some of them rely strictly on Facebook ads, and that's great, but why not look at some affiliate partners and other people who can promote what you do? And I've got a good eye for identifying low-hanging fruit, if that makes sense. When we own a business, we look at it from about an inch in front of our nose. And I'm able to come in and take a look from 30,000 feet and say, okay, you've got something great here, but what about this? What about that? And I've been very lucky to work with some people who've been very open to testing things. And, ultimately the data tells you if you're right or wrong. So, my big thing is let's fail quickly, because the first iteration is never the final iteration. So let's create the minimally viable product. Let's put it on the market. Let's test it. And then let's constantly optimize and improve. And in the beginning, you can take some very big swings that could impact conversion by 50% or more. Once you're at scale, then it's the smaller incremental things. You're adding 2% here, 3% there. But over time, that adds up to a lot of incremental revenue.
And it's those little tweaks that make the huge difference. Now, James, that you're running multiple businesses, helping lots of people, how has business finances played a role in all of that? Because you can't have multiple businesses without numbers being involved. So what role has that played for you?
Numbers are very important to me. So I know my numbers. I know what it cost me to acquire a customer in any of the businesses. I know what they're worth over time. I run very lean operations. The last thing I want is high payroll. In today's world, there's really no excuse for high payroll. So I have fractional people who do different things in the businesses, because I'd rather pay somebody really well for 5 hours a week and get what I need than pay somebody 40 hours a week and have somebody of a much lesser quality. For example, if you're helping me on the accounting side, if you can help me in 5 hours a week and then the business scales and it goes to 10, I'm happy to pay for those extra 5 hours. But what I will never do is hire you for 40 and give you 2 hours a week of work, because it makes no sense. So I identify good people, I pay them well, and I'm lucky in that some of them I've worked with for 4, 5, 6 years, and they help me run an efficient operation. My businesses are self-financed. I try to stay away from bank financing as much as possible. That said, in the e-commerce world, there are lots of wonderful options. Like, for example, if you have a good Shopify store, Shopify Capital will offer you money. And it's not a loan, it's an advance for a flat fee, and then they pay themselves back as a percentage of sales. Now, the beauty of that is their algorithm is good enough that they can probably predict within 2 to 3 weeks exactly when you're going to pay them off, unless something catastrophic happens in your business. But there are no personal guarantees. There's no credit checks. Your business has a run rate of X. We're prepared to advance you to help fund your operations. So that type of financing, I love. It happens very quickly. Literally, you can have money in your bank in 24 to 48 hours. Once you've paid off half of the first loan, they'll offer you a second one. So you can take the money today, but you don't start paying back the second one until you've fully paid back the first one. So it actually becomes a very inexpensive source of money.
Got you. I love it. So, James, what's on the horizon for you? What are you looking forward to?
On a personal level, my daughter is 2.5 years from graduating from medical school. So, very excited for that journey, although there's going to be several years of residency and everything afterwards. So she'll be on my payroll for quite a while. Business is just, I want to grow, but I want to grow responsibly. I see businesses who go from 0 to 5 million very quickly, but 6 months later, they're gone just as quickly. I'm much more about stable, sustainable growth. I like building brands. I like building value. I generally don't sell stuff, but everything has a price. And if somebody makes the right offer, they can have the keys tomorrow. That's absolutely fine. And, I'm always looking at opportunities and seeing what else I can get involved in, whether it's on a passive basis or on a more active basis.
Amazing, amazing. James, thank you so much for sharing your profit story with us. Where can people connect with you?
The easiest place to find me is LinkedIn. So just search for James Klein, Klein. I don't have a bot responding to messages or anything else. I answer all of them myself.
I love it. I love it. This has been amazing. Look, entrepreneurs, if you need help, feel free to reach out to James. He's definitely an expert in the e-commerce and branding space. I love all the wisdom that you've shared with us. If you guys need help with your business finances, just go to pamjordan.com, book a call with my team. And remember, it's not what you make that matters. It's what you keep. Thanks so much.